Welcome to UI Open Doors. My name is Jennifer Title. I'm an assistant dean at the UI Graduate College. And we're joined tonight by a guest, Patricia Gale, who received her PhD in English from Penn State University. She's a technical writer at Adipar. And welcome, Patricia. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So we're going to jump right in and get started talking a little bit about your graduate school experience. And my first question for you is really, during graduate school, as you were preparing for your career, did you know what direction you were going to go for a career?
So I switched directions a couple times in graduate school. I think like most English PhDs, I went in expecting to come out with an academic career. But I realized, I would say within the first year or two of graduate school that for various reasons that wasn't going to be right for me. Some of those were lifestyle reasons. So I started graduate school in 2008, which is right about the time that the academic market really crashed. So I knew that it was going to be difficult to find a job, and then it was looking like it was going to be nearly impossible to find one in a place that I would be able to build the kind of life I want. So I'm married and wanted to live with my husband. That was a big factor. So that was one reason that I kind of switched direction. But I also found myself missing some of the things that I really liked about a career in industry, which I had had before graduate school. So I think I started looking for something that would be the right mix of my academic and research interests and the things that I really liked about industry within, as I said, probably the first year or two of graduate school. And I considered different things. So I had been a technical writer prior to graduate school, but in a company and in a situation that's very different than the one that I'm in right now. I considered going into library science, and that's something that I worked toward at a number of different points in graduate school, and then I considered various careers in kind of technology before ending up in technical writing again, which is a place that I found myself very happy.
Fantastic. So the preparation, once you had sort of, I mean, it sounds like you, like most people, kind of looked around at a lot of different things during your time in graduate school, but the preparation, once you decided to go towards technical writing, what did that preparation look like for you?
Yeah, so I think the biggest goal that I had was really to try to build out a resume. So in graduate school, most people are focused on building a CV, and I did that as well, but building a resume is pretty different. And what that really meant for me was trying to find experiences that would allow me to have really tangible professional experience, but also tangible skills. So anything that allowed me to learn a new technology, anything that allowed me to write for a different kind of audience or to create a different type of writing or type of research was going to be something that I knew that I could kind of market to a non-academic audience. So I ended up having experiences at Penn State with our Teaching and Learning with Technology group, with the libraries, and then also in different capacities with the English department as well.
Fantastic. How did you find those opportunities? So did you seek them out on your own? Did your advisor talk to you about them, your department? Were they advertised in your department?
A mixture. So the library's assistantship that I had was advertised in my department and was something that I was really excited about. So that was one that I, found out about through my department and then applied for. The Teaching and Learning with Technology assistantship I learned about from one of the members of my committee who was very involved with that group on campus, our Educational Technology Services. So I heard about that through him, and then got to meet some of the people who worked in that group and was really interested in what they were doing. To be honest, I don't remember completely how I ended up with the English department composition office assistantship. I imagine the department approached me about that, but I'm not sure. It was a while ago.
Fantastic. Um, the other thing with your preparation, now, correct me if I'm wrong, your dissertation, while not aiming towards the type of work that you do now, sort of intersects, right? Could you talk to us a little bit about your dissertation and how that worked in your behalf?
Yeah, definitely. So my dissertation was a kind of book history study or publishing history study of publication in London in the middle of the 18th century. And I started with the goal of making use of this really large data set called the English Short Title Catalog, which is an attempt to record everything that is known to have been published in English in the 18th century. And so I knew that I had this amazing resource that I could try to tap into, and I wanted to figure out a way to analyze that data kind of on a large scale, which nobody had really done before. And part of my reason for choosing that dissertation was just personal interest. I really loved publishing history and had already done some research in that area. But the other kind of more pragmatic reason for choosing it was that it gave me an opportunity to perform not just the literary analysis. So I did actually read a lot of the works that were published during that period and kind of argue a bit with literary critics about what they had said about the works being published. But it also gave me an opportunity to build some tools, to use technology, to develop basically a database that I could use to analyze that catalog. And that was something that I could really explain to people who knew very little about the literature and frankly cared very little about the literature, but wanted to know what I had spent my time doing, why it was interesting, how it might connect to other types of projects and other types of skills.
Fantastic. And it served you well as you went forward? Were you able to,
yeah.
I mean, did that come up in conversation?
Absolutely. I'm pretty convinced that that was a strong reason that I ended up getting this job. So the company that I work for, Adapar, does data analysis on a much larger and more complicated scale than what I did in my dissertation, of course. But it really gave me a way to talk to them about my interest and passion for things that were related to what they were interested in and passionate about. So when I wrote my cover letter for this company, I talked a lot about my interest in data and data analysis and my focus on that during graduate school. So I was able to prove that not only did I have the writing skills that they were looking for in a technical writer, but I was also someone who really understood the problems that were important to them and the things that they were interested in examining. And I talked about that a lot in my interviews here as well.
So you mentioned, I'm really curious, since you mentioned being able to express that you understand the problems of the industry. How much of, that's something that I think is pretty foreign, I will say, to a lot of the folks that I work with. How much of a factor was that during your interview? Clearly some of a factor and in developing your materials. But could you speak a little bit to helping PhDs understand how you might demonstrate to an organization that you understand the problems that they have?
So in my case, it wasn't understanding the problems that they were specifically trying to solve. Adapar is a financial technology company, and I knew absolutely zero about finance when I came here. And I told them that because I didn't want to get myself into a position where I was expected to know things that I was not qualified to know. What I really tried to prove was that I shared a similar mindset, that I approached problems in a similar way, that I had research skills and the ability to ask questions that would really get me to the heart of the problems that they were trying to solve. So when I started here, as I said, I knew nothing about finance, but I knew a lot about how to ask people about their experiences using technology, or how to really identify questions that people weren't asking but should be asking. So that's kind of where the data analysis bit, I think, came in for me. I didn't understand finance, but I was able to say to them, hey, look, I know what it's like to look at a big set of data and try to identify what the interesting points might be, and to figure out creative ways to kind of look at that data. And that's what they were trying to do too. And so I think that's how we kind of resonated with each other. So it's finding the commonality between what you have done and what the company is really aiming to do, and figuring out a way to pitch yourself so that you can communicate on that level.
So this leads me to talking a little bit more about your job. And I have to say, the job of technical writer is still somewhat of a mystery for a lot of the PhDs that we work with. Could you walk us through maybe what it looks like for you in a day or in a week?
Sure. I'll start by saying that the job title, technical writer, means totally different things at different companies. And so the job that I have now is very, very different than the technical writing job that I had prior to graduate school. And it's different from company to company. The expectations are different. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I'm doing now. So I currently work as my company's only technical writer, which is really challenging, but also really fun for me because it means I get to do a little bit of lots of different types of things. Technical writing for me involves, and I would say this is probably the most common technical writing task, writing product documentation. So we make a software product, it's a web application, and our customers need to learn how to use that web application. So that includes basic things like writing instructions for where you click to perform a certain task, but it also means doing a lot of research to understand what our customers are really trying to accomplish, and then explaining how to accomplish that. So the theory behind it, or advice behind it, best practices, lots of examples, things like that. So that's one piece of it. I also work with our engineering teams when they're developing new features or revising existing features, and I give them a lot of advice on usability, especially from the kind of interface text perspective. So if you're in a menu or you're clicking a button and it has text on it, that would be something that I would advise them on. Do we say save or do we say finish? That kind of thing. But also when you get an error message, what should that error message say and why should it say that? So that's another piece of it, and that's actually, I think that's one of my favorite parts of the job, just because it's a lot harder than I think I realized it would be. Making those decisions, making sure things stay consistent and that they make sense to somebody who's unfamiliar with what's going to happen before you click that button. Because we don't have a big marketing team, I work a lot with marketing as well. So I help to write, I helped with some of our website text. I helped to write product briefs, materials for our sales team, things like that. That's not typically technical writing. That's a little bit more like copywriting. But I think that's also something that people can put their writing skills toward. Let's see. Those are probably examples of some of my most common tasks. So I work with our design team a lot too, I guess.
So it sounds like there's design involved. It sounds like, I imagine a sense of tone, or, developing
Yes.
a particular sort of tone that Adipar wants to, and you are sort of the representative of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's a lot of learning who our audiences are, figuring out who our users are, and then figuring out how to best communicate with those users. So what language do they use, and how do we translate the way that our engineers are developing our product into a language that can be really recognized by our customers and our client base. And that's tricky because, of course, people are diverse and they have different expectations, different comfort with technology, and we have to try to anticipate all of those things.
So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper here for a moment. What does that research consist of? What does that look like?
It kind of depends. I mean, honestly, on a day-to-day basis, it's mostly internal research. So we work with the customer support team, who are our most direct contact points with our clients. But it can also be, and has been a few times in the past, meeting with the clients themselves. So either sitting in on meetings that they're having with our support team or with our sales team, or actually going on site to talk with the clients about their experiences using the technology. That's something that we hope to do a lot more of. But I would say that's another potential career field for people who are really interested in research. User research is a really big field. It's also a very specific field, so it's something that you would need to have very particular skills and background in. Pretty often people come to that with a design background, and I think that's also something that can be expanded upon for people with a lot of experience in social sciences as well, because a lot of the skill sets are pretty relevant. So knowing how to write a good set of interview questions, knowing how to give people frames, which is a kind of design tool when you're prototyping, to allow people to give you feedback on what the interface would look like. Anyway, so the research is pretty varied. It can also be, on a more basic level, it can be just looking at a whole bunch of websites. So what are people in the finance world saying about this particular feature of the application or this particular investment type? Or how are different companies describing similar processes or similar products?
Okay. So, and you mentioned, so this is sort of your current role as technical writer. How has it changed post PhD? Obviously, you did this job, a very different sort of job as a technical writer pre-PhD. How has that changed? I mean, I know the two jobs are different, but has it also changed for you personally?
Yes. Yeah. I think both of those things are true. So first, it's just that the job itself is very different. So I am the only writer, which means I have a lot more responsibility, and there's a lot more scope for creativity. In my previous job, I was one writer of many in a company that was very well established, and so that meant that our procedures were already sort of ironed out. I will say that I don't think that I would have gotten this job without my graduate experience. Now, from the company's perspective, I think that was because I was able to explain my interest in data analysis, and I was able to use a lot of my experiences in graduate school to really prove that I am independent, that I can write well, and that I am, capable of the research components of this job. But I think from my own perspective, I don't think that I would have been a clear enough thinker or writer to be really qualified for this job if I had not gone to graduate school.
Sounds like it. You were able to sort of leverage your graduate school experiences to create the...
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's really important. One of the things that's interesting for me right now is that we're starting to hire more writers. And so I'm looking at a lot of resumes, and I've seen just a couple that have come in from people who are coming straight from graduate school. And I guess my advice to people out there who are going through this right now is to really put a lot of thought into your audience. So I've seen a couple examples of people who will say, I see that you're looking for a writer. I was wondering if my skills match what you're looking for. But then they don't explain what those skills are, or how they might relate to the job description, or what the company's mission is, or how the company sort of describes itself. So to some extent, that's an issue of just frankly, not trying hard enough, not trying to tailor your materials enough, which everybody should be doing. But I think it's also a lack of maybe an understanding or confidence in what you really are gaining from graduate school and how you can pitch that. I think it can be easy at the end of graduate school to feel kind of burnt out, and at least I did, burnt out and kind of depressed. I think thinking about the things that you have gained and trying to find tangible evidence for those things is going to be good for you, but it's also going to be really helpful for your application. So if you're applying to a company that needs to write for a very specific type of audience, finding examples of your ability to do that, or even just talking about your ability to write for different audiences and your flexibility as a writer or as a researcher. Anything you can do to try to match the skills that you have with what the company is looking for, rather than expecting them to look at your profile and be able to kind of divine what that might be, is going to be really helpful.
It's terrific advice. So I'm going to also dig a little deeper into that. From your side, since you're on the other side of the table now, what would make an ideal sort of cover letter, resume? What catches your attention?
The first thing that I think would catch my attention is somebody that is really addressing the company personally. So there are a lot of form letters, a lot of cover letters that are clearly just very generic, a lot of resumes that are very generic. So the first really impressive thing is just, have you taken the time to think about what my company is trying to do and how that matches what you're capable of contributing to the company, but also what your career goals are, so that we know that we could really grow together and be good for each other. So that's point one. I think point two is, in terms of resumes from people that would be coming from graduate school, trying to make sure that your resume is a resume and not a CV. So that means rather than focusing on your educational qualifications and your research and teaching qualifications, focusing instead on skills that you have and finding examples that you can use to demonstrate those skills. I think that's really huge. And of course, matching the skills again to what the company is looking for and what the company is trying to do. I think that tends to work really well. And so that could mean proving that you're really adept with a particular piece of technology, but it could also mean proving that you have maybe administrative capabilities, or that you have the maturity that comes from managing an independent project or many independent projects, as people do have in graduate school, proving that you have varied writing skills, that you can write for different audiences. All of those kinds of things are huge. And so again, the more you can provide evidence of those things, the more successful your application is going to be. So it's one thing to just say, I have research skills, but it's quite another to say, I have research skills. Here is an example of a type of data that I worked with. Here's the result that I got from that and why it was important to my field, and kind of explaining what exactly you contributed and what skills that demonstrates.
That's a great answer. So if I ask you how that went for you personally, how did you understand to do that? I mean, I think that's an ideal sort of answer to give a student. But how did you learn those lessons? Did you work with a career counselor? Did you figure it out on your own? Is it something that you figured out since the time that you applied at Adipar? Did you rely on another mentor? Because those are definitely not things that are typically taught in a doctoral program, how to sort of transfer and aim your skill set towards a company.
Penn State has an excellent training program for people who want to go into academia. In my experience, my department was very supportive of my decision not to do that, but the resources were not there. So I think that I learned to do that because I had already done it, to be honest, and because in my previous job as a technical writer, I had participated in interviews, so I had already kind of been on the other side of that and seen what that looked like. And I would say the other way that I really learned to think about this, and this was maybe even a stronger experience for me, was through teaching technical writing, because in the technical writing course that I taught at Penn State, we had an assignment on resume writing. and cover letter writing. And seeing my students go through that process and trying to coach them and teaching them how to read a job description and how to think about that as a kind of rhetorical practice, how to put themselves in the employer's shoes, really made me a lot better at that myself. So I think that was probably, honestly, how I learned the most, was trying to help other people do it. And I've helped a lot of friends with this as well. I mean, I think we all do. You know, the more advice you ask for, the better. I got everybody to read my resume who would read it, and got feedback from all of those people. And then you just kind of iterate. You know, I had a bunch of different versions of my resume and my cover letter, and I kept revising and I kept changing. And so in addition to just tailoring them for different types of jobs and seeing which jobs I had the most success for. So I should say, when I applied to jobs out of graduate school, I applied to a lot of technical writing jobs, but I applied to a ton of different things too. And it was, for me, just a matter of finding out what felt like the best match for my skill set, but also where my resume and my skills seemed to, you know, draw the most attention. So anyway, it was coming up with different versions of the resume, coming up with different versions of the cover letter, finding out which ones seemed to be working for different audiences. It's painful, and it takes a long time. You know, the academic job search is a nightmare. Searching for jobs in industry is also really challenging. The scope is a lot bigger, so that's great, but it also means that, you know, you have to come up with, you know, 10 different versions of all of your materials and different types of materials. And, you know, it's not easy, but there's a lot of potential.
So in thinking about that change, and this sounds like it might be a little bit different for you, but I will say that a lot of our doc students, particularly if they're headed towards an academic trajectory, once they decide to no longer do that, or that for some other reason isn't going to materialize, there's almost a period of mourning or frustration that accompanies that. And I think you hinted at that a little bit, but how was that in your experience? I mean, did it take some almost new identity formation when you moved from sort of graduate student in English department, PhD student, to technical writer with a PhD in English? Like, how did you build that new identity for yourself? I mean, it's sort of a hybrid identity, and it's a new thing for people.
Yeah, so I guess I could say a couple things about that. One is that for me, the end of graduate school was very, very difficult, and you know, in some ways kind of depressing, but it wasn't because I didn't like the career that I was headed into. I was actually really excited about that. I think for me, it was transitioning out of an environment that doesn't traditionally value what I wanted to do. And then honestly transitioning into an industry that doesn't always understand what I do. So I work in technology. I'm the only writer at my company. I am one of the only people with a humanities background. It's very different. And so I think for me, it was kind of like, all right, we're gonna find ways to think about what I contribute that's different, about my background and experiences that are valuable and unique and special, and then figure out the ways to translate that into what I'm doing now. And I think that that's been pretty successful. I've had a lot of fun at my company, you know, teasing people about, I get messages all the time like, oh, Patricia's going to be disappointed with me for this thing that I wrote. And that's funny to me. And, you know, we can tease back and forth about that. So it's been fun to see that you can be valued for skills that people might take for granted in other industries. And you can really, you know, find a spot where what you do is like special and valued in a different way than it is when you're amongst people who share your skill set.
That's a really interesting juxtaposition to imagine, like you said, to be within the program and be headed a slightly different direction and sort of be on the outside there, and then be in the industry and then be back, you know, as an outsider there in certain sorts of respects.
Yep.
So it's sort of one lonely position to another lonely position, or perhaps one position where you're required to explain yourself to another position where you're required to explain yourself regularly.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, you know, there are certainly days in either case where you're like, oh, this is exhausting. You know, I really wish people understood what I was trying to do. But the longer you keep at it, the easier it gets. And being in that unique position has a lot of advantages too. You know, it does mean that people turn to you and you get different types of respect, and, you know, I would say just valued. You're unique.
It's something that I think definitely makes you stand out for a variety of ways. So, moving a little bit to sort of your decision to. So I know you're in Silicon Valley, which here in Iowa means just something sort of exciting and very different. I think
isn't there like a Silicon Corridor or something in Iowa? It's like Cedar Rapids to Iowa City. I seem to remember that being pitched as a thing.
It's a creative corridor, yes. And
for those of you in Iowa, I should say that I went to undergrad at Iowa State, so I'm familiar with Iowa and like Iowa. Fantastic. Not just teasing you.
No, there's a lot of energy around small startups here. It's, I'm sure, quite a different environment, but with the university and a lot of connection and enthusiasm for sort of the startup community, I will say, right here in the Iowa City to Cedar Rapids area, you're right. But beyond that, in thinking about your decisions and where you are, how much did something like, say, geography play into your decision? Did you look, when you were doing your job search, did you need to be looking in a certain geographic area? Did you need to be going to California? And beyond that, I wanted to know, and we can get into this a bit more, about sort of lifestyle decisions. You mentioned that a little bit in the beginning, understanding sort of the lifestyle that you were looking for, and how much did that play into making your decision?
Sure. So we'll start with geography. Geography was huge in my decision. So I think this could go either direction. You could kind of decide where you wanted to live and then figure out what jobs would be interesting to you in that area. For me, it was that I knew what field I wanted to go into. So I wanted to go into technology, and then using that to limit, you know, the search to the areas where I would be most likely to find a good job. So that's how I ended up in Silicon Valley. It's definitely, I think, the place with the greatest density of good jobs in my area. But I looked at other places as well. You know, and as I said, I was searching with my husband, so that was a factor too. But he's also in technology, so that made it a little easier. But we looked at Seattle, Boston, Austin as kind of the biggest and most promising tech fields. So your second question was lifestyle. I don't know exactly how to comment on that, except to say that I think in graduate school there's a lot of emphasis on putting lifestyle second. You know, so that's totally understandable, right? There are 3 jobs in your field. You want one of those jobs. You want to be tenure track. And so you have to kind of sacrifice maybe geography, or you have to sacrifice culture or politics, or whatever it is that's important to you about where you live and how you live. You know, proximity to family, all of those types of things, cost of living. I think that can be a huge factor. Now, for me, lifestyle and career goals kind of went hand in hand. So the cities that I mentioned that were places that were really promising for the jobs that I wanted are also places that were pretty well aligned with the lifestyle that I was looking for. But that's not always the case, and it is an important factor.
I think there's you know, some sort of negative feelings like that you hinted at, that graduate students get negative vibes about when they consider lifestyle, when that's sort of betrayal of
Yes.
The
Yeah,
discipline,
I've always thought
the purity of the discipline.
It's hard to explain, or it's been hard for me to explain as somebody who has a lot of friends and relatives outside of the academic world, that it kind of felt like you were taking orders, like joining a monastery or something, and you really had to put that above everything else and kind of take any sacrifice that would come your way. I wasn't willing to do that. And part of that was just that there were other things that I wanted to do with my career, but part of it was honestly, I don't know, I guess you could put it that I didn't want it badly enough, but to me it doesn't feel that way. It just feels like I was looking to do other things with my life and to lead a different sort of life, and I feel pretty happy about that choice.
On a practical level, because this comes up for so many of the students we work with, how did the job search work with your husband's job search? Could you talk a little bit about the logistics
Sure.
of how you did that with two people?
It's complicated. So we had already done this a couple times, so we're pretty good at it to the extent that one can be good at it. We did this, we got married right out of college, so we did the job search post-college together, and then we did the grad school search together, and then we did the post-grad school search together. So in our case, there's been a little bit, honestly, of a trade-off. So like post-college, I got a job offer in a city that, in Austin, in a city that we knew we would really like living in and where there would be a lot of good jobs for him to apply for. So even though he had a number of offers elsewhere, I took that one, we moved there, and that worked out well for us because he got a job pretty easily there. Graduate school, we applied to all of the same schools, even though we're in different departments. So he's in the math department. But we picked schools that kind of fit the profile that we were both looking for, which was very hard. And then applied to all of the same schools and agreed that we would go to the best school that admitted us both. Again, it's hard. I think that at every step of the way, we tried to be very clear before we made the decision about how we would make the decision. So for example, with graduate schools, we said, okay, if one of us gets into the dream school and the other person doesn't, but we both get into, our third choice, then we go to our third choice, that kind of thing. So being clear about it up front was helpful for us. And then in the post-grad school job search, it was the same thing. So we're going to narrow it down by geography. We're going to figure out, who gets the best offer. We're going to go to a place that would be a geography that's good for both of us. And this time he got the job first. So he's amazing. He had already had a couple different internships and ended up getting, he was working basically as a consultant for a company out here in Silicon Valley during his last year of graduate school, and then was offered a full-time position. And so that was a pretty easy decision for us to make the transition out here.
That's great. So we'll continue with lifestyle for just another moment. Will you tell us a little bit about sort of your lifestyle, your work-life balance on a day-to-day basis? What hours do you work? Do you work from home? Do you travel?
Sure.
Is it a 9 to 5 kind of thing?
Yeah, so I feel pretty happy with my work-life balance. I like my job. I work long hours, but not ridiculous hours. The commute kind of sucks, but that's not my job's fault. It's just traffic. So I would say I have a pretty good work-life balance. I'm usually in the office from about 9 in the morning until about 6. And then it's fairly common that I'll work a little bit once I get home. It just kind of depends. I might work a little bit on weekends. Again, it kind of depends on my schedule and projects. If work is really busy, then I might work a lot. If work is not so busy, then not. And but yeah, I would say probably on average I work maybe 50 hours a week. The company that I work for has really awesome benefits. So for example, we have unlimited vacation time. Now that doesn't mean that people necessarily take a ton of vacation, but it does mean that you can when you want to. So I've been here for about 1.5 years. For the first year, I didn't really take much vacation, but now I just got back from a 2-week vacation to India. So that's pretty awesome. Let's see. Other perks. I really like coming into the office, so it kind of doesn't feel like being at work.
Tell us what your office is like. I'm guessing your office is quite different than our offices around here.
So I'm actually at the office right now. We have an open office plan. It's a little messy, but it's fun because people laugh a lot and you can make jokes with your colleagues. People bring their dogs into the office. I haven't actually seen the show Silicon Valley, but I'm told that it's kind of like where we work. I don't know if that's good or bad. But we have catered meals where I work, and that's really nice because it's really nice, but also because everybody then eats together, and so you're friends with your colleagues and you get to talk to people from different teams. It's a fun and comfortable place to be. There hasn't ever really been a day where I've dreaded coming into the office. There are certainly plenty of days when I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get everything done that I need to get done, but it's never a sense of dread, which I think people sometimes feel.
So related to that, I will say, do you consider yourself more introverted, more extroverted? I know a lot of the folks that we work with try to imagine, or could be listening to you and would try to imagine having lots of people around them all the time. And that's really different than the life of a scholar, right? How was that adjustment for you? Was that a very natural adjustment? Or is it, and obviously you worked in this field prior to going into grad school, but I'm trying to imagine it from a graduate student's perspective, what that would look like.
Yeah, I would say I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a little more introverted than extroverted. It's really easy to, here at least, it's really easy to signal to other people that you don't want to talk. So, for example, we have a headphones rule in the office. If somebody is wearing headphones, then that means that they are focusing on their work, they're getting their work done, and it's not time to talk to them. We also, I mean, this is probably a terrible stereotype, but being an engineering heavy company, we have a lot of people that are introverted. Maybe that's just our company, maybe not. But it means that we have a lot of procedures in place to really protect people who don't want to be engaging and socializing all the time. So the headphones thing is one example. We also use a lot of messaging apps. So if somebody wants to talk to me, in fact, I got one just during the time that we've been talking, they can just send me a message, and that means that I can decide whether or not to respond to it now. I can ignore it until I'm ready to talk, or I can talk without having to, engage face-to-face. So I found it a pretty easy transition. I do think that for people who are, so I'm the kind of person who likes to work in coffee shops, or I'll work with music on. And so I think that made the transition a little bit easier. I think that for people who really need quiet, this would be a pretty hard place to work. And a lot of offices like this would be kind of difficult. But it varies from company to company a lot too. Some offices are very quiet. My office is not particularly quiet, but I haven't found that to be difficult, I think.
Thank you. So I think we've hit on most of our things. I see we have a small audience that's been watching us. I know we'll get more hits tomorrow, but before I let you go, I know you spoke briefly earlier about advice you would have for students, but students interested in following your career path, what kinds of things would you want them to do now? You gave them a lot of great things, but is there any sort of takeaway that you want them to know?
I think ideally, and this is hard, but like the sooner you decide that you want to go into a non-academic job, the easier it's going to be for you, because you can really take the long path to proving that that's what you want to do. And so that means taking the time to develop the skills that are going to be required. So if you want to become a technical writer, or if you want to become a UX researcher, or whatever it is you want to do, Go out, read a whole bunch of job descriptions, look for the things that are coming up a lot, learn HTML, or learn Photoshop, or learn whatever it is that you see in the descriptions of jobs that sound like jobs you would like to have. Come up with some deliverables that you can use as evidence of your skills in that area. That's going to help a lot. Basically, I think one of the things that we have to prove initially, the first time out the door as a graduate student searching for a non-academic job, is that we understand what a non-academic job is, and that it's something that we're really interested in having. So the earlier you can prove that you've been moving in that direction, the better. But even if that's not the case and you're trying to kind of reposition your profile toward the end of graduate school, being able to think about what it really means to prove tangible skills, being able to think about making a compelling argument to a company that this isn't your second choice, that you really want to be in this career, that you've thought about it a lot, that you understand what the career is, and that you're in it for the long haul. That's really, I think, going to go a long way toward getting you past that hurdle.
Excellent advice. Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate talking to you, and I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight to our visitors.